The Extraordinary Phenomenon Investigations Council presents Epic Voyages. Come join us as we enter and experience the great mysteries of the world with tonight's host,
Kevin Cook.
Good evening. This is Kevin Cook, your host for another edition of Epic Voyagers. I want to thank Ken Cherry for letting me host this show. I normally have the show on Tuesday nights, but I came up with an interview with Jesse Ventura, and I thought I really need to do that. And we're booked up till August, and Ken was very gracious in letting me, host this version of Epic Voyagers. I'm going to keep the news items to a minimum because we got Jesse on the line, and I don't want to keep him waiting. But the news pieces tonight really bear on some of our conversation. The Supreme Court has reversed the Montana Supreme Court's decision and is, once again favoring large economic interests, super PACs and what have you. The Montana Supreme Court tried to do something about that, but they were swatted back down on basically partisan lines. That came up today. And also, in a related issue, Arizona's law to, at least to inspect the legal status of some of its residents was upheld, even though some of the enforcement actions have been restricted. But, this, of course, is ridiculous because, I've got nothing against Mexican Americans at all, not whatsoever. But, we do have a country of laws, and, we should have an organized immigration situation. But the government, for its own reasons, is behaving in a, who knows whether the National Restaurant Association is running things or who knows. But the government has not basically, until very recently, done anything about immigration regulation and restriction and enforcement, and supposedly they are now, but that's after 25 years of letting all these people in here. I mean, I'm not getting on a soapbox on it, but it is an issue of a lot of contention on both sides. And the Vermont Senate has rejected an amendment that would give control over the state to control GMO crops, because they're essentially afraid of the major chemical companies. Now, here's the Vermont Senate saying they don't want to get into it as far as having a bill to regulate these genetically modified crops. And it's a big issue. And a related story on that, and I'm not laughing because the poor old cows, I don't want them to die, but there was some hybrid grass in Texas, in Elgin, Texas. It's called Tifton 85 that killed a whole herd of cows, because it emanates cyanide. Now, guys, I'm not a biologist, and I don't know that much about crops, but we better watch what we're doing with these genetically modified crops. If it's anything like the grass, we could have some problems. And on a very light note, this was on Good Morning America, and the CBS News reported it again. In California, there was a mother bear. Her cub was in a garage. Of course, the garage had a garage door opener set up, and it, has a railing where the rollers would run. And the cub was somehow trapped up on top of this railing with the rollers. Okay. The mama bear, this is on video, the mama bear lifted up the garage door and basically coerced her cub into getting the heck out of the garage. Now, I'm just saying, if that doesn't mean animals are intelligent, there's nothing I could come up with that would. But, I mean, she basically had to coax her cub into leaving the garage. I thought that was kind of cute, and if you get a chance, I'm sure it's on YouTube. And very quickly, I might mention two shows coming up. Tomorrow in the Kevin Cook Show, I'm going to have Laurie Champion on at 8 p.m. Central. She's going to have a bunch of EVPs and proof of an afterlife, and heck, we need proof of an afterlife because this life's pretty rough. And July 3rd, we're going to have Arthur Faram on, and he'll have hidden history. And one thing I've learned, and we'll discuss this tonight too, is the way they tell it's seldom the way it is, as my old man used to say, and that certainly applies in politics and history itself. So, for all that said, Jesse, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Couldn't be better. My ear's a little sore because I've been on phones and doing interviews for 2.5 weeks, and you do these big blocks with radios in the morning where you do like 20 stations in 3 hours, 2.5 hours. So, you know, you need your breaks because you end up getting a little punchy from it after a while, but I'm hanging in there. It's what you got to do if you write a book. No one's going to read it if you don't publicize it, so you got to work at that end of it also.
Absolutely, and I want to mention that book right now. It's Demo Crips and Rebloodlicans. Now, this, of course, is a play on the Crips and the Bloods, but it really I've read it.
Well, the key is the subtitle, No More Gangs in Government.
That's the key, and that's all we got, is gangs in government. If it was ever clear.
Absolutely.
Oh, Jesse, how did you ever get elected as an independent? How did you?
Well, you know, Minnesotans are very independent. We're like the mecca of the third party movement. We actually have, I think, by definition, 5 major parties up here. Democrats, Republicans, the Independence Party, the Green Party, and I think the Libertarians are all considered major parties in Minnesota because the threshold is very low, and which it should be. And so that's why Minnesota, you know, is a place where an independent like me can get elected. Plus, we also lead the nation in voter turnout every year, which goes to show you that the more people that vote, the better chance there are for an individual like myself to be successful.
Yes, I'd have to say that. There does seem to be an independent aspect of Minnesotans for sure, because, well, Michelle Bachmann's a little bit different candidate. And,
well, actually, what's kind of hilarious, she's actually my congresswoman. I live in her district.
Okay.
You know, but it's very diverse, you know, not everybody's like her, you know, but apparently the majority in the area are, because she seems to manage to get reelected every year, or every other year, I should say. I'm kind of similar to yourself in that, yes, I do lean to be the Democratic side of things, but I'm more an independent. I don't really fit in a box, and the Democratic Party is... Well, for me, it's simple. I'm fiscally conservative and I'm socially liberal, which means you can't fit into either one. That's pretty much me, too. Yeah, to me, government should not be involved in telling who can get married and who can't. That's not their business. If churches don't want to recognize gay marriage, that's their business. They're the private sector, but government, to me, shouldn't even be in that business. Anyone that wants, how can government tell you who to fall in love with and marry? Well, that is, I know what you're saying. I know. That's... Well, and also they want to amend constitutions to say marriage is between a man and a woman. Well, constitutions are there to protect people, not oppress them. And also the bigger picture is this. You need politicians with spines and courage, because you can't take a civil rights issue, and they love to do this, allow the people to vote on it, because then you're allowing the majority to make a decision for what probably is a minority issue. So the chances are the majority is not going to favor it. I mean, if we allowed us to vote on civil rights issues, we'd probably still have slavery if it were up to a vote. That's a very good point. I never thought about that, but that's a absolutely, because, I mean, who wouldn't want somebody to do all your housework and your yard work for free? Yeah. If you could get it. And that's the point. You need politicians who have courage to take and look and say what's right and what should be to make their vote and stand by it. If you turn it over to the public, you're going to get all the prejudice in that voting booth, and nobody sees how you vote. You know, and so, as I said, we'd probably still have slavery if they put up civil rights issues for a vote. You know, that probably is so. It really is. And I know one thing that's been my little tenet in the Kevin Cook show that I host on Tuesdays is that everything is a conspiracy. And people think, oh, you're some kind of fruitcake. Well, no, I'm not. Everything I've experienced as a salesman, a businessman, and other experiences in life,
everything is basically fixed. It's fixed about the two gas stations, the main gas stations in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, about how much they charge for gas. It's fixed who gets the contracts on what such and such is. And
well, and politics, when I taught at Harvard, one of my classes was how pro wrestling prepares you for politics.
Yeah.
Because it's very much like professional wrestling, in front of the public and in front of the people and all that stuff. They act as adversaries, but the truth is, behind closed doors, they're out there making deals. They're making sure their power stays intact. Like when they do redistricting for the congressional districts,
yeah.
They set those. Well, they do them to where they know the majority of this area is Republican. This is that they never have any competition. Did you know that probably less than 10% of the congressional races are even competitive?
No, I didn't really. I didn't.
Well, yeah, because they set the districts up that way. They know where is a Republican strongholds and Democrat, and they make those districts so that the incumbent 90% of the time will be reelected all the time. And it's all set up that way.
Well, you know, I remember there's a couple quotes in the studies I've done by pretty big-time historical figures like President Roosevelt, because he said, in clear terms, I'd have to paraphrase it because I don't remember the exact quote, but in essence he said, everything to do with economics, guys, don't let anybody kid you, is completely fixed. It's fixed. It's thought out. It's fixed. It isn't just a roll of the dice and there you go.
I believe that because I'll give you an example that I've learned, and it's in my book. This current 2008 recession, all of us lost money. We all lost wealth. You lost it on your home value, whatever it may be, except the upper 1% of that 1%. The billionaires, they actually gained 5 times their wealth during this last recession. Now, what does that tell you? That tells you they create the recession so that they can become even more rich. And I sit back and go, my goodness, if you're worth $10 billion right now and you're worth $50 billion at the end, how much money do you possibly need?
Yeah.
You know? I mean, you couldn't spend that in 5 generations, that much money. And yet, Jimi Hendrix had a great quote, the late guitarist. He said, how did it go? He said, the power of love, until the power of love prevails over the love of power, we will never have peace.
That's pretty good. I never heard that.
Oh, it's phenomenal. Let me repeat it. Until the power of love prevails over the love of power, we will never have peace. And I think he's right on with that.
Probably so. Oh, the other quote I was going to mention to you is from Woodrow Wilson, another president. What he said is back in the 20s. He said
he was back more in the teens.
Oh, yeah, the teens. That's right. The First World War. And
he's like before it. He's back at the turn of the century, just into the 1900th century.
No, the Woodrow Wilson was the First World War president.
Or whatever. All I know is I thought he was a scoundrel.
Well, no, not so much. No, I think you're talking about Taft.
He's a scoundrel. He created the Federal Reserve and violated the Constitution.
Yeah, in 1913. That's right, he did. 1913.
Yeah,
I guess
the Constitution states we shall have no central bank, and they looped it and created the Federal Reserve, and that's who runs the country.
I know, but I guess maybe he got religion when he got older, because he said that he regretted starting the Federal Reserve. But he also said, I guess what I was really getting at, is he said there was a conspiracy that existed as far as a cabal of power cliques that was so powerful that even big-time guys like Henry Ford wouldn't mention their name above a whisper. In other words, he was saying there's this interlocking group of elitists back then. And I can imagine it's only gotten worse now.
The other bad thing about Woodrow was what he did to women's rights.
Yeah.
You know, he wasn't a very big... Huh? Yeah, women trying to get the vote.
Yeah.
He like, tortured them.
Well, I'm not saying
all they
the
wanted to do was vote.
Oh, I know. I'm not saying Woodrow wasn't a...
Well, that's why I call him a scoundrel. If people read about him, you go, oh, my God, this guy was too much. Anyway, him aside, let's move on to today in my book, if we may, for a little bit.
We sure can. Okay, Jesse, the people that are the scoundrels, in my particular opinion right now, and I'm glad you have a chapter on them, is these Koch brothers.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're just like the...
well, they've taken over the Tea Party. For everybody who thinks the Tea Party is some grassroots movement, read my book and you'll find out that they may have started as a grassroots movement, but they were co-opted by the Koch brothers and big business and money. And you know how you know that? Take a look at the difference between a Tea Party demonstration and the Occupy Wall Street demonstration. The Tea Party is never attacked by the police or the dogs. The Wall Street people get pepper sprayed and dogs and run off.
Well, that's
and there's your difference right there.
Well, you're
One
sure
is
right
allowed to, the other is not.
Yeah. Well, you know, one thing I could say about this, and I know the Koch brothers are... Okay, here's what happened. I've mentioned this on some other shows, but you have a similar insight into these things as myself. But see, I tend to be a liberal, like yourself, a socially liberal type, and, you know, economic conservative, yeah. But what I'm saying is there is a conspiracy among the major media groups to have very, very few. If they have a liberal guy, he's like a piñata they use to beat up on, like Bill O'Reilly or something like that. In other words, they don't have a combative guy like myself that might mix it up with them. They just want, like professional wrestling, they want the token guy that might lose to Bill O'Reilly or come off looking bad with Sean Hannity. And what I'm saying is there is a conspiracy against liberal talk show hosts.
Well, it's I wouldn't say so, because if you go to MSNBC, that's the liberal mic now. I'm banned from both. Fox News will not have me on, and MSNBC will not have me on. Don Imus will not have me on. So, you know, the liberals are there. You know, they have MSNBC. That's their fair and balanced. And then if you flip it over to Fox, you get the Republican fair and balanced. Neither one of them are news, because all they are is opinionated entertainment. See, the downfall of the news was the show 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
Let me explain. 60 Minutes itself was a great show, investigated a lot of things and did a lot of unique things, but here's why it was the downfall. Up until the 60 Minute show came on, all the news media wrote off the news. It lost money, but they felt that was important to inform the people. They didn't care about revenue. Then along came 60 Minutes, and it went to number one on the charts, right?
Yeah.
Well, with the bean counters, the light went off. And they said, wow, you mean we can make money with the news? See, they used to make it up in the entertainment division. They would make up for the loss they got in the news, much like the movie network. You know, whatever they lost in the news, they made up for in entertainment. But when 60 Minutes came along, they realized they could make money with the news. So now they're not interested in reporting the news, they're into creating it. And that's dangerous. And the news is now based upon how much revenue it can bring in. So the news is now entertainment. You know, when you look at it, you don't have Walter Cronkite anymore and that type of thing. And it's also been taken over by the corporations. I listened to Dan Rather the other day.
Oh, yeah.
And Dan Rather, the report he made on George Bush's military record was completely true. And he got fired for it. He got fired for it.
That's what I figured was right by the time. Yeah.
If that's not bad enough, what he said later was worse. He said 20 years ago we had roughly 40 independent media news outlets. Today, due to corporate takeovers, we're down to 4. Now, these are the same 4 corporations that buy off the politicians, the Democrats and Republicans at the same time. So you've got a corporate takeover happening in this country, and the definition of that loosely is called fascism. So we're turning in, if we're not there already, into the fascist states of America. We're not the United States anymore. And in light of that latest Supreme Court ruling in Montana, that backs it up too.
Oh, it does.
And the bad thing about that, it doesn't bother me that they all pump all this money, and what bothers me to a point, but the key that bothers me is that they're not required to tell who gave them the money.
Yeah.
You know, they can now, which means a foreign country could now buy the Democrats and Republicans right out from under us, and we'd have no way of knowing because there's not complete disclosure. If you're going to have money coming in like that, there must be complete disclosure. Now, I've got kind of a funny way to look at it that'll make you laugh. We should pass a law that requires all presidential candidates, Senate candidates, and congressional candidates to be required to wear NASCAR racing suits. Because like when you watch Jimmy Johnson, say, the great NASCAR racer, when he wins a race, you always see him get out where you can see all the patches on his suit of who his sponsors are.
Oh, yeah.
See, if we would make them wear that, then we'd know who owns them and we could be more informed voters. We'd say, okay, this guy's bought out and is bribed by who? And it'll be right on his suit with a patch.
Well, I sure urge all the listeners out there to get your book, to read that chapter on these Koch brothers, because I'm just about sick of hearing about the Koch brothers and their intrusion into our political system. I mean,
oh yeah, they're just buying it. Well, they're not alone. You know, there's more than just them. You know, they just happen to be one aspect of it. But and the reason I can talk to this is simple. When I ran for governor of Minnesota, I only raised $300,000.
Really?
I only took 10, 50, 25, and $50 to $100 donations from individuals. I never took $1 of special interest money or PAC money. And here's something that I don't think any politician in modern times can say. In my 4 years as governor, I never met once with a lobbyist.
Wow, that's unique.
Unique. They didn't elect me. They didn't buy me off. What did I need to talk to them for? Why do you think they wanted me gone? Because a lobbyist's whole job is to get access to the elected officials so they can bribe them. And what's interesting, in the private sector, bribery will send you to jail. But in the public sector, it's alive and well, and it runs our entire system.
That's very true.
And it even goes beyond that. Let's talk for a moment about investing in Wall Street. If we as privates, and I show all this in the book, if we as private citizens get insider trading, what happens to us? We go to jail. Yet congressmen and senators, that's all they do. And you know what their average, this is the average wealth when they do Wall Street, 12%. That's higher than Warren Buffett.
Wow.
And it's because they have insider trading. Yeah. They know what's going to happen to the stocks. They're privy to everything that's going down, and they subsequently invest accordingly. That's why when some of them go in and they're not millionaires, they always come out millionaires.
Well, they highlighted that Rick Perry guy here recently in Texas, where he's been making basically $100,000 a year type income for many years, and his income his net worth has gone astronomically high, and
sure, and that's because of that, and then you talk about health care. Wait till you hear this one. Yeah. Okay, they call it Obamacare, and they tell us government-run health care is no good. Well, then why do we have it for veterans? The veterans have government. Are we screwing over the veterans, or is it, if it's good enough for a veteran, it should be good enough for all the rest of us, shouldn't it?
Sure.
Well, get this. Congressmen and senators have government-run health care, so they're nothing but hypocrites. When John Boehner stands out there and wails on government-run health care, what do you think he has? And here's what he has. We show it in the book. He has 5 options to choose from of government-run health care. We in the private sector, if we have one, we're lucky, and most people have none.
Yeah. I didn't know they had 5 options. That's pretty cool.
They have 5 options that they can pick from for their own health care. And here's the one that really will irk you. We found 20 or 21, I can't remember which, convicted felons who still get their retirement from the government, even if they're in jail. Now, if you want to get term limits, I'll tell you how to get them. Take away retirement. Why should there be a retirement for public service? See, no one would stay in it for 30 years unless they got some fat retirement out of it. And that's what they all get, a big fat retirement.
I know when Steve Croft recently pinned down, to his credit, he did bring up the investment issue we just talked about, and he mentioned it at a little press conference with Nancy Pelosi. Boy, she acted like he just shot her in the foot, man. I mean,
well, they're always guilty. I mean, I tell people all the time, you always face, if you're not a member of the 2 gangs or parties, the mainstream media will portray to the public, well, like they did in Minnesota, well, if you vote for Jesse, you're wasting your vote because he can't win. And they do that all the time. Well, I'd like to reverse that. And I'd like to tell people that if you vote for a Democrat or Republican, you're wasting your vote because you're going to get the same thing. It doesn't matter. Both sides have been paid off by the same lobbyists. They show up with their big bags of money.